Start the recording. Okay, we missed the opening prayer, but we did pray in if you're watching this recording later. And so we'll be recording this. If anybody wants to say anything and not have it recorded, remind me just to pause that while you share or say something that you want to do. Feel free to use the raise your hand buttons or just wave at us if you have something you want to say. We really want this series, these classes, to be interactive. So if you have something you need clarity on or something that you want to ask questions about, feel free to pose a question to our ministers also, and we'll be more than happy to discuss anything about this book and the chapters that we read with you. We just want to remind you that at the end of the class, I'll remind you that it is a tithing class. You just tithe to your home church for wherever you're from, because there's so many ministries here coming together for this series, that you just tithe to the church in the way that you normally tithe through your online giving, mail a check, drop money in the basket on Sunday, whatever that you do it for your home church. And that way you keep the supporting where you are spiritually fed. I just want to introduce our facilitators again. We have Reverend Teresa Curry from Unity of Daytona Beach, Reverend Kathy Beasley from the Central Florida Center for Spiritual Living, Reverend Tracy Quillen from Unity of Palm Harbor, Reverend Jim Ernston from Unity of Central Minnesota, and Reverend Maggie Alderman from CC Orlando. And I am Reverend Don Barton, also from CC Orlando or Unity of Central Florida. So I'll be posing the questions and taking your questions and keeping this conversation lively. And we just really have 2 chapters to go over tonight that we had for reading. So if you got a chance to read those, great. If not, we'll still keep you enthralled and enlightened. And we'll do a little mini meditation in the middle of it, just to kind of break the class up, to do something a little bit different, because it just ties right into with what Charles Fillmore is talking about in chapter 3. So I want to get started tonight and just revisit a little bit of chapter 10, which was the affirmative word, because it seems like you could really do this book in any order. The chapter orders don't really matter, but chapter 10 with the affirmative word kind of really underscores everything that Charles is talking about in this book, because he's talking about changing our thoughts and changing our words, changing what we say. And it all keeps coming back to this personal choice and how the universe responds and how our life responds. And even in this chapters, how our body responds to what we think and what we say. And so I just want to come back to that thought, that process, that affirmation that Charles proposes in chapter 10, that there is this power in our affirmative word. So I want to just give our ministers a chance just to add a little bit of any insights, understandings, or explanations after we've been delving into this material for 3 weeks, that you'd like to share about the power of affirmative words and how we use our words and our thoughts, the power contained and the effect it has, not only in our lives, but in the universe. So I'll throw that out. Is there anything that's really coming to mind for you guys that we haven't talked about already that kind of underscores what Charles is saying about this power of our word? Jim.
Hey, I'll jump right in there. So for me, the thing that I work on most of the time is my self-talk. What do I tell myself? What are the words that I use in my own head? But then even more important to that, what are those things that I say out loud? What are those things that I speak, give vibration to? So those are the 2 things that really come up for me within this book, within affirmative speech, within affirmations, is how do I talk to myself, but then also what do I give birth to in terms of vibration into the universe?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah. What words do you give to yourself, not just to the world? Exactly. Reverend Teresa.
Yes, I just wanted to share too something that hit me this week, and obviously it's not new, but as we began to speak about our let our yeses be yes and our noes be noes, and so as I say that great power of yes, yes is our affirmative words, the thing that struck me as I was looking through some scripture and some metaphysical meanings of that was that when I'm in that place of what you're talking about, really, Jim, that self-talk, that when I'm giving more power to my false self than my true nature. It just struck me that, and I was reading someplace on Truth Unity or wherever, and it was talking about that really what I'm doing is negating God or negating truth, which of course doesn't, we get that, but it just hit me. It was so profound for me this week that I thought, wait a minute now. So not only do I want to get caught up in like, what kind of vibration do I want to put out there? And what do I want to add energetically, for myself and for the world? But the fact that, I'm just truly negating my creator. And that just struck a real chord with me. So I just wanted to share that with everyone, that, speaking truth, of course, is affirming. Yeah, I believe, affirming our divine nature and everything like that. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. It just hit me deeper this week. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, actually, that's great. I never really thought of that either, but yeah, when it makes sense that when you deny something bad, you affirm something good, but you don't think of the opposite, that when you're affirming something not so good, that what are you denying? Something truly good.
Mm-hmm.
It works in the reverse too. Thank you. Yeah, that had not occurred to me. Yeah. Kathy? Or Tracy, one of you had your hand up. I saw.
Tracy's giving me that smile. I'll go. The thing that I think about, and I absolutely agree with Jim and Teresa, that I'm very conscious of the words that I say to other people, because I can hear them. And so what this reminds me to do is become even more conscious with the things that I think to myself, the stuff I can't tell y'all, the things that I think to myself, because the mind is eavesdropping on everything. But what this drew into focus for me was the idea that what we're really talking about is transformation. And we've seen a lot of New Thought thinkers be credited with the idea of change your thoughts, change your life. But what we're really talking about is not just, I'm going to put y'all on hold for a minute and go put my green t-shirt on and come back. It's deeper than that. We're talking about a change that starts within us and then manifests beyond us. And so when we start looking at affirmative words, we have to also take into account, what do we say to ourselves about ourselves? How do we affirm ourselves? How are we using the power of that I am statement? And how do we use it when we're standing in front of a room? But how do we use it when there's nobody in the room except for us and the dog or the cat? What are we saying to ourselves? And I think that road to transformation begins with the idea of accepting what is, and then calling yourself to a higher point in consciousness, and being willing to now change the pattern of your words, because we weaponize them as a culture and society. How do we change them and use them for our good? That's all I got.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah. And as you were saying that, I'm like starting to see how all these different topics and concepts that he has in this book all are pushing the transformation, thus the Keep the True Lent. That's what he's talking about. So it's like all of these things are starting to come together to go, okay, this is what because he doesn't give a really good explanation. This is what I mean by this book. So it's like when you put it all together, it's like, yeah, this path to transformation is this Lent period that we're going through, whether it's the 40 days before Easter or any time period in our lives. Yeah, thank you. Jim.
I'm going to go a little bit outside the, I'm going to color outside the lines here a little bit, in that this is great stuff from Charles, what he wrote. But what I don't read anywhere within this book, within this text, is the caution. And I do caution us not to judge ourselves if we just do a little bit of, smack talk on ourselves. We need to be gentle, and not blame and not judge ourselves. It reminds me a whole lot of Buddha and the parable of the arrows, to where if you get shot with an arrow, it's not your fault. But if you blame yourself for that arrow, then it's as if you were shooting yourself the second time. And then it's, ooh, why did I get shot a second time? And that's the third arrow. And it can go on forever as you blame yourself for each of these things that keeps coming on. So we need to be gentle with ourselves, even if we're not in that perfect space of affirmation.
Yeah, very true. Exactly. Yeah. Tracy?
So I'm thinking more along the lines of what our thoughts are that we manifest into the world. And I'm sure y'all have been dragged in and off social medias on this. I met with the Eastern Board of Ministers, about 20 people this morning for 2 hours, and it's phenomenal conversation. And of course, it was about the Oscars. So someone makes a comment that is supposed to be done in humor. Someone else reacts strongly to it with a physical manifestation, and the world gets turned upside down, millions of people, and this conversation begins. So earlier Monday, I was talking to a beautiful musician who wants to perform a concert benefiting Ukraine. He is, I think it's MMC, the church denomination. He's in Venice, so he wants to do it there and then come see us. And he said, but I'm just one person. What difference can I of my little self make? And I thought, well, Jesus was just one person too. And I'm thinking this action on the stage Sunday night, 2 people, 1 person reacted, and the whole world is now opening up a conversation. So our words, to me, I truly do believe, carry power, carries weight, it carries power. It's not just our self-talk, it is what we bring in the universe. And we don't always know where our pebble gets thrown and how those ripples are going to spread far and wide. Is it for healing? Is it for growth? Or is it going to be to cause damage? And we have the power to make those decisions. And sometimes it's going to have its own life.
Very true. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. And Rev Teresa put in the box, it's all about awareness. And it is. It's being aware of our thoughts and their possible effects. And are we being positive or negative to ourselves and others? Yeah. Rev Maggie?
Well, so I'll just come at a different angle, and because I could repeat everything that everybody already said so beautifully. So the power of our words is also something like, once we are in the awareness and the alignment of gaining or maintaining or expanding our dominion over the self-talk and what we allow to escape past our lips when someone does something that we want to slap a judgment on or punch them in the face for or whatever, is that we start to collect a positive energy force field. Like, we are responsible for this. And now I want to say we need to protect it. That's in the awareness place too, for what we allow of others' power and their spoken word to penetrate our force field, penetrate the good work that we're doing, because we can be negatively influenced, and we are vibrationary beings, right? So you get caught up in the sewing circle, tit, 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 by the front door where everybody's checking their bulletins. And all of a sudden, I don't know if I feel quite right. And now I'm going back to do more of my work to get back to where I was, because I was eroded by someone else's power of the spoken word. And that's part of this Lenten practice as well, because if we put our attention on what we're allowing in, what's contributing and not, deteriorating to our quality of consciousness, we're going to naturally find ourselves releasing people, releasing social habits, maybe finding ourselves in different, more positive and uplifting. That might be a new mentor, and it might be someone sitting on the back porch with Grandma Sarah, whatever it is that we start to think, man, this feels good. And when I'm around so-and-so or that topic of conversation, I don't feel so good. And we build that two-way street of awareness, both what we're releasing, but what we're also accepting. And that is a deep part of the Lenten practice.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else have any comments or questions on the power of our words and our thoughts? Any ahas that they've had over the last couple of weeks? before I go on to something else? All right, great. Good. So chapter 3, the house not made with hands. And this is just, to me, it's a continuation of this conversation, because it is Charles talking about how we actually create and manifest our physical selves in this world by our thoughts and our words. And, for me, this all starts with, him watching Myrtle use her affirmative words, to heal herself. And, that's the foundation of this whole movement. And he makes some just incredible statements in here. And so this little chapter is rich for conversation. And one of the things he says in the book on page 21 is the body is wonderfully obedient to the I am. He goes on to say it's renewed and transformed by thought. He and Myrtle witnessed and totally believed that your body responded, good or bad, healthy or unhealthy, to the thoughts that you hold, the words that you say, but specifically to your thoughts. And he poses the question, if that is so, where do we think, where is the limit to the healing that you could possibly bring about in your body? And because Charles was very logical and thought it all out and would take it to the nth degree, his position is that there is no limit, there is no limit to how you could actually heal your body with your thoughts. And as we kind of hinted at before in the conversation, that there probably is no limit then to the damage that you could do to your body with your thoughts that people don't think about. And he says that just the one healing of a single sickness proves this whole logical statement that he comes about with, that there is no limit to his healing. So I wanted to start tonight's discussion with those statements, which are, the core of the Fillmore's teachings on affirmative prayer. That's where it all came from. And, it's just an exact example of this whole power of the affirmative word that we're talking about. So what are all of our takes on that? What do you guys think? Are there limits? And have you had any experiences in your ministry or your own personal experience with healings? And do you see limits or not on what's happened and what you know of? What do you feel about the limits on physical healing? Kathy wants to jump in first.
I know, right? And part of it was my cursor turns into a little hand, so I wanted to see what would happen if I could align my hand with the little hand on the screen. In case you wonder how ministers entertain themselves. Donna, you were reading that there's a particular pericope of scripture that came to my mind for those of us who need a scriptural anchor. What I thought about was Romans 12:2, that talks about don't conform to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that idea that, because depending on where you're standing in the world, and depending on how much of your truth you're able to hang on to in a moment, then we can be affected by that, by the circumstances. We can be affected by what's going on around us, by the word in the air, all of that. I don't think that any of this means that we are like Teflon, stuff just bounces off of us and it doesn't stick. No, we're fully human in our process of understanding our own divinity. So I think when we look at it, if we look at the limits, we're going to see limits. But if we look at the opportunities for healing, we will see opportunities. And what I've found just in my own ministry is when I encounter people who are stuck in the story, they're more connected to the story than they are to the solution. that's where I find that the limit is. I think the limit is individualized in us and it's momentary. And so it just depends on what it is that we're willing to focus on. And we all know the law of mind action. Whatever it is we focus on, it expands. So if you want some more of that, just look at it long enough, be with it long enough, and you just order yourself up a side of whatever that is. But when we choose to allow the transformation that we know in ourselves to start internal of us, that renewing of the mind, that's the changing of the mind. And we know Charles said that he reserved the right to change his mind based on some more information. So this idea that we can change our mind, we do it all the time.
Mhm.
I mean, I go from soup to chicken in one thought. I go from hot to cold in one thought. We change our mind all the time. I think the thing is changing our mind focused on us, change our mind about ourselves. And I think that when we encounter limitations in the world, I think it's that people may not have seen enough examples of that change in other people. Because there's a lot of stuff I didn't believe. But when I got a hold of the truth of Myrtle's story and started to understand what that healing meant to her while it was yet to be manifest in her,
Mhm.
that's when I started to go, okay, this is not a load of hokum. This is just up to me. And if it's up to me, then it's up to you. So when we get ready to change our mind, that means that we are willing to change the locus of that thought and the direction of that solution for ourselves.
Great, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Who wants to follow that up? Tracy?
What she said. I can't even, I'm going to let you talk, Tracy, because I'm just like, damn, Kathy, you just took me to church for a second there. Woo. Thank you. I will pass.
You can come back. What I was thinking, you asked, do we have any personal examples? And in my personal life, at a certain point, my mother was diagnosed with 4th stage lung cancer. She brought me to Unity. She was studying to be a Unity minister. My life wasn't going well at a certain point, and she said, go to Carol's church. And the next 15 years, I started to get it together. But what I watched with her, that changing your mind, those options, there's not enough options if we think there's not enough options. And one of the pieces of the puzzle that we did was to go to Sweden, where they have medicine there that's not officially approved in the United States. So what my mother showed me was keep your mind open. The options that you think are available, expand, go bigger, open another door, look for another channel. So that's what I was thinking when a year after she passed, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it's not an uncommon thing for people who are cellularly close, that when someone's been through something really big, for that to be transferred on. And I'm not going to do spiritual bypassing or any of that stuff. But I am going to say something was obviously up for me. And so because I learned from my mother and holding true to these spiritual principles, I went inside and asked my guidance. What is it for me to do? Because as soon as I walked in that room with the doctor, I said, there will be no chemotherapy. There will be no radiation. You're not going to put me through what my mother went through for 4 years. I'm not going to do it. There's quality of life. And she's like, ooh, slow down, girl. We don't have to do all these things. But what it did do is allow me to get quiet, not claim it, not live in the story of it. Tracy's not cancer. There was a diagnosis. And I really felt during the year of going through this process that I was like above, watching, observing. There were little moments where I dipped back down to the earth plane and I was really scared. Do I get to stay here? And then there was another part of me that's like, and what if you don't? Are you okay with that? So it gave a lot of this whole thought, where are we in our thoughts? I could have lived in the story. I was at church with somebody who lived in the story, got a lot of attention from the story, and that's not where I was. So I think there's so much choice and so much opportunity to open other doors that you don't even know about. And then for me, I stayed very close in my quote story until I knew I was going to be okay, including not telling my children until I knew I was going to be okay, because I didn't want everyone else's thoughts and words to influence my decision. And now we're 8 years clear. I don't tell everybody to do what I did, but that was my choice.
Right.
And I think God and I did that together, and it was the right choice for me at the time.
Yeah, wonderful. Great. Thank you for sharing. Jim, you want to add?
Well, I think you know now that I'm going to veer off the topic a little tiny bit. What interests me, I guess, we're talking about limits. We're talking about limits. We're talking about where our mind possibly limits us, where our beliefs, where our faith possibly limits us. And I take a step back even further to some of the other teachings of the Fillmores in terms of we're embodied right now in the physical realm. We're living and manifesting within this physical realm. And I wonder for myself how important limitation is in that realm versus limitation within that spiritual realm. So for me, I focus on the spiritual, I guess, and I believe 100% there is no limitation into anything that happens, anything that I can move into, anything that I can learn, anything that my eternity, my forever is there. I guess I don't worry what is that percentage in this physical realm. I haven't seen anybody physically unlimited, and yet I'm not worried about it. I don't dwell there. This may not be very unity, I don't know, but I shift my focus more towards the spiritual rather than worry how unlimited I am in this physical realm. This physical realm isn't that important to me. Course in Miracles says this is a tiny mad idea, and that there is no purpose to this world. Now, that's not what we believe in unity. Unity, we believe that there is a purpose to this world. I give it less credence than the spiritual realm.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, much different perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Teresa?
Yeah, I'll just I'll go back the other way a little bit, but I would say, are there limits? And yes, you know what everybody else was saying there, you know, that limit that comes from our humanness. But and when you take in where do all those limits come from? You know, look at all of our old belief systems and everything that we were raised up. Well, you know, Aunt Kathy had arthritis and a bad hip. Well, I guess that's in our family. We're going to have that, you know, all those types of things that you hear all the way through, you know. And then also too, how much we buy into whatever the world is telling us this moment about health issues or whatever the case may be, noticing what we just came through with the whole pandemic, as it were. But yes, you know, where do I think the limits are? The limits are, you know, as I always say, you know, right between this ear and that ear. And does the physical body have its limits? Only if that's what I place upon myself. But of course, you know, spiritually, I believe unlimited. And I think that, you know, when Kathy was talking about Charles saying, have the right to change my mind, and that thank you, Kathy, for all of that, because that was like expansion all of a sudden, not just the fact that I could change my mind about something as I grow and evolve and mature and things like that, but that, you know, that transformation that's happening to us all right now, right here in this process as we're having this conversation. And then when you spoke about, you know, physical healings, the first thing that came to my mind, I have not personally witnessed in myself any type of a particular type of a physical healing, but it made me think about what we get to witness in ourselves and in the people that we're around and in our congregations and things, just the spiritual transformations that we're witnessing all the time and the growth in us all spiritually. So that spoke to me on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Maggie, did you want to circle around and add anything else?
No, I'm just learning tonight, apparently. You all are so wise. Thank you.
Yeah, very cool. I just wanted to share two little quick stories that that had a huge effect on me when I was studying this concept of how your thoughts can change your mind and whether or not you can have limits or not. And one was years ago when I was new to, I probably was taking SEE classes in this whole process. And CCU had a men's group. And one of the guys in the men's group, I wasn't even attending the men's group at the time because I wasn't that engaged yet. And one of the men, one of our chaplains, was going for a final checkup for prostate cancer with his oncologist before he went in for surgery. The day after their men's group meeting, and I was told about 12 men that went fairly regularly to the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, he asked for prayers for them for the condition that he was diagnosed with, and they put him in the middle of a circle and prayed over him and affirmed health and healing and wholeness for him. And he went to the doctor the next morning, and the doctor couldn't find the prostate cancer, and he never had surgery, and he's been absolutely fine ever since. And that kind of perked my attention to this whole concept for years. And I like what they've spoken about tonight, that the limits to what you can achieve, even in your own body with your thoughts and words, are placed on yourselves. Because I personally had a bulging disc in my neck a few years ago and did not place any limits on healing that. I mean, I was with the CT scan in the, forget the name of the kind of doctor that operates on your spinal cord, whatever, but he basically told me, this is static, it will never get any better, and you'll just get the surgery when you can't stand the pain anymore. And I was in chronic nonstop pain for a couple of weeks at that point. And when he said, there's nothing you can do about it, I just thought, I don't believe that. Just this little voice in the back of my head said, I don't believe it. And someone just put in the chat box that I myrtled it. And that was my statement. People said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to myrtle it. I'm going to myrtle it. And my affirmation was, I think I can remember it, because it was talking about everything, your bones degenerating. And I said, my vertebrae regenerate, my disc is restored. My vertebrae regenerate, my discs are restored. Because he showed me on the little X-ray or the CT scan that was bulging millimeters and pressing on this nerve that was giving me pain all the way down my right side. And I thought, it's millimeters. If myrtle can heal tuberculosis, I can move my disc millimeters. And it took a couple weeks. And I did 1 week in ministerial school with prayer partners. And we had to hold a prayer for each other for 1 week. And I said, pray for my neck. And that week, when we had to get together every single day for 7 days and pray with each other for one thing that we were holding for each other. And that was the week that I had the biggest improvement in my pain level, was that week when these 2 other ministerial students were praying with me. And it eventually went away, and I never had the surgery, and it's never came back, and I've never had another symptom from it. And I realized when you guys were talking, I had absolutely no limitation on what I thought was going to happen. I didn't have a limitation on the amount of healing that would occur, the possibility of healing that could occur. And, you know, one of my doctors said, well, you probably didn't do anything other than your brain knew to shut off those nerve receptors where that irritation was coming from. And I thought, so that's still the healing I was looking for. I'm still pain-free. I'm still healed. So that the limits we place are truly ours, I think. I think that's what Charles may be talking about here, is exactly what we talked about tonight. The limits are ours on what we can and can't do. So that's my little personal story with healing that I just wanted to share tonight, and the power of thoughts. Danielle, did you want to say something? You're still muted. Nope, not yet.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yeah, I dropped my computer in the sink while I was getting dinner.
Oh, no.
So it's okay. It's an 8-year-old computer. Anyway, I put my hand up before that beautiful and awesome story, Reverend Don. But I'll go ahead with my question, but that was awesome. Thank you. I flagged this section too. This really stuck in chapter 3 to me as like, what? No limits? And at the same time, I was reading the Dalai Lama, The Universe in a Single Atom, where he describes how he's trained with physicists, spoken to, had friendships with physicists, and he's pulling this all together. And as a scientist, absolutely, the placebo effect is real. The power of belief in something healing you is real. The no limits thing is kind of a different take on the question. And so one of the things the Dalai Lama says in this book about the nature of Buddhist thought and reasoning is that you want to reason, and first you want to observe the universe, and you can't counter actual observations with your reasoning. And I thought that's an interesting lesson, and a lesson we can bring into modern Christianity in a lot of ways that, you know, and this ties into when I did the 12 Powers course, the discussion of faith. And I had a lot of reflections on what faith really is from that discussion. And so on the one hand, that would, since everybody thus far has died, as far as we can tell, then there is some seemingly natural limit. And it might be because that's the nature of the universe that there is. But then as I hear this discussion, the countering thought that came to mind is that perhaps, and I think Teresa, you maybe reflected on this, that we are so bound, and I know Jim, you did, we are so bound by what we believe the boundaries are. That as a culture, as a group, as a race, as a species, we have to go on beyond that boundary to understand that, yes, we are more powerful than we think we are. So I'll just offer both of those reflections in balance. And I guess it's yet to be determined. And just because right now, observable fact is that there are limits, does not mean that those limits are necessarily intrinsic to the universe. Anyway,
Right.
These are my thoughts. My mom's calling me. Speaking of limits, so I got to go.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Yes, exactly. And
Can I say something about what Danielle just said? Because you know what it
sure,
reminded me
absolutely.
of? In the Aborigine culture, there are healings that take place that don't make sense to the Western world in medicine. When I did a trip to Peru with Reverend Edwin Gaines, and it was all about the shape shifting and the ayahuasca and so forth, they do believe that that purges through you demons, bad thoughts, ill wills, and that there's healings that occur. I got really clear. I only need to do it once in my lifetime. But there are things that cannot be explained, that when you hold prayer circle, when you hold consciousness, when you hold ceremony, when you hold rituals, it does transform the body. Just wanted to offer that. And I love the song, There Are No Chains That Bind Me, Don. That's what reminded me after you said your thing. I love that. I am unlimited. There are no chains that bind me.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, Don,
Yeah.
I had I had another thought that showed up somewhere in here. And it reminded me of when I first started to study the science of mind. And I started to understand that there's a difference between the things I believe and the things I know. And that when we stand in prayer with people, we know for them that outcome that they seek. And there's a power to the idea of what we know. And so when we're choosing to stand in that truth of what we know, I mean, my name has been Kathy for 56 years. I don't have any questions about that. I just know that that is the case. And I haven't called my family lately and go, are y'all sure about that? It's just, I know. And I think that there is this way of being within us, this unalterable wholeness that is us. And that process of healing is us coming into the realization of that unalterable wholeness, which means that we remove all opportunity and access points for limiting thoughts or limitations to occur. We just focus on the wholeness, and then we just allow that to continue to expand, to continue to manifest. in our lives. And that's why I said that piece about being stuck in the story. Are we stuck in the story, or do we want to be stuck in the solution? Do we want to be stuck in the answer to the difficulty? Do we want to be stuck in the idea that it's nothing but the absolute that we're dealing with? And allow that to just become that space of knowing within us.
Yeah, very true. Thank you. Yeah, and Danielle brought up a great point of, you know, are there intrinsic limits? And we have, you know, Charles in that chapter actually saying that you can elevate your spiritual body or your physical body to a spiritual level. And he actually makes the statement, you know, can we save our body from death? And his answer is yes. And so, I mean, there's no way you can get through this chapter without broaching that statement that Charles is saying that we can save our body from death. And so my question is, do you think Charles is being literal here? That anyone, if they pray enough, meditate enough, raise their consciousness to a high enough level, can beat death with their body by bringing their body into a spiritual realm? Or is he just saying it's possible in theory, this would be the natural extension if we had enough time, if we had, you know, able to get to the same level that Jesus did? Or is he just saying this logically would have to be the ultimate outcome, but for us, you know, is he being literal, or is he just being speaking in the absolute?
Don, so some of the reading I've done, when Myrtle passed, a number of people left the Unity movement because she and Charles preached that you could reach that realm of living forever. And there's a piece, one of her letters or one of the beautiful books written about her, where she says, I can do more good on the other side now, and supposedly peacefully transferred. But then when they did, you know, some looked at her body, she'd actually been suffering some physical ailments. Maybe she didn't verbalize them. My grandmother would have never told you what was wrong with her. You know, there was a generation. But I do believe that Charles thought he could transcend and live forever. I'm okay with not. I don't want to be here decrepit and old in a bed. And I do have a congregation where the majority is over 65, and I'm witnessing what they're going through, and the good stuff and the not so good stuff. So I don't have a problem with not being here forever, but I really think he taught that.
Yeah, thank you. Jim?
Yeah, I think Charles was. I think Charles was literal. I can't go there, and here's my logic behind it as well. Is we think of Jesus as our way shower, and living forever was not important to him. So that's my example that I'm going to stick with. Is you know, we're moving into the Easter, the holy season, the holy week. A spiritual resurrection, yeah, absolutely. Living forever, no, he didn't demonstrate that. So that's where I'm going to go.
That's a great point. I never really looked there just for that analogy. Yeah, thank you.
I think that sometimes I have a personal relationship with Charles, so I refer to him as Chuck. And so I think that he chucked it. He was just being very literal in that thought process. But the question, Jim, that raised in my mind as you were talking is, when we start to think about this, whether I can live forever, it led me to question, what is the part of me that I'm talking about? What is I? Is I this sexy suit that I get to wear? Or is I that ethereal, eternal component of my soul that moves from point to point? So I think I think the question and answer are in the same room. But I think that it is resolute and connected to the how we understand I.
Right. And we were posed with the question, do we believe this body could live forever? And I'm going to give it a no.
Yeah. Teresa?
Yeah, well, I believe everything y'all just said too. The fact that, yes, I do think that Charles was being literal, because I, like you, Tracy, from what I understand of Charles anyway. And I only know him as Charles so far, Kathy, but I hope to get to just carry
I
on.
appreciate it, too.
He seems like a Charles to me, but anyway, I lost my train of thought, sorry. But yes, I do think that he meant it in a literal way. And I just think that he was not able to achieve it. And as all I could think about, is those words that I heard in ministerial school when they were describing Jesus, the most highly spiritualized man. But also too, Jim, as you spoke, I appreciate that. I didn't really think about this so much, but I thought, no, I don't believe that Jesus had attachment to the body and wanted to demonstrate anything about living forever in our human skin in that sexy suit of yours, Kathy, that you're talking about. But, much more, but rather leave us with what, yes, that in our divinity and in our consciousness, that was the focus, and that I am, that Christ consciousness was the focus. So, much what you guys have already said, but I appreciate that, because I hadn't really gone there lately, thinking about it just that way. So this is a very enlightening conversation. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Good. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I want to do something a little bit different now. Just in case you notice, Reverend Maggie had to drop off for a little while. So she left the conversation due to a prior engagement, but just didn't want to have her just disappear and not say anything about it. So I want to do a little meditation now, because Charles talks a lot in this chapter about how we hold our body in a spiritual realm, how we can cause our body to be restored, how we can heal ourselves, how we can use our word and our thoughts and our power to manifest our wholeness. And he says what causes the body to be restored is the divine idea of perfection, that in divine mind there's this perfect idea of us, of man, and that we are perfect manifestations of divine mind. And so I want to take that into meditation so that we can ground that in ourselves, that idea that regardless of what this pretty little suit looks like that we're wearing, and whatever we feel about this physical being, that we are manifesting a divine idea, and we're doing it at a much higher level than we give ourselves credit for. So let's take that idea, that divine idea of perfection, that idea of divine wholeness, that divine mind idea of us into the quiet space. So I invite you to get comfortable and take a breath. Take a deep breath. If you want, close your eyes. And set your attention on just this next breath, this next moment, to allow your body to relax into your chair, to allow your arms to go limp in your lap, allow your feet to rest on the floor, allow the chair to support you. Allow your mind to focus on this next breath in and out. Drop your shoulders. Allow your mind to calm and to focus as we enter into a stillness, this inner chamber, as we drop our attention into our heart space. And we simply breathe and become aware of the divine being that we are. Focus our attention coming from our soul, from our core, our innate beingness, goodness. And I invite you to bring into your awareness the concept, I am the perfect manifestation of the divine idea of me. I am the perfect manifestation of the divine idea of me. This body, this being, this shape, this age, this color, this size, this ability. I am the perfect manifestation of the divine idea of me. I invite that divine idea in and through my being, manifesting in each organ, each bone, each tissue, each ligament, each cell, each atom. The divine idea of me perfectly manifest as I am here and now in this moment. I am the perfect manifestation of the divine idea of me in this moment. As I am the perfect manifestation of the divine idea of me. Divine idea of me empowers, invigorates, restores, brings wholeness, heals. I am the divine idea. I am a divine idea. I am divine. Take a deep breath. I am the perfect manifestation of the divine idea of me. I am the perfect manifestation of the divine idea of me. I am the perfect manifestation of the divine idea, me. In this moment, for this hour, during this day, and throughout this lifetime. And so I am, and so it is. Amen. Take a deep breath. When you're ready, open your eyes. And I invite you to just feel your divinity, to know that you are healed and whole and perfect in this moment. So let's go on then to chapter 4. We've got just 30 minutes left. So chapter 4 is the Christ in you. And Charles in this chapter is talking about how we define God and what we see as God, and how we define God can only be our perception, our conception of him based on our limited perceptions, on our limited vocabulary, on our individual understandings, our experiences. And he makes a great statement on page 25 that says, those who conceive of God as a person will invest him with personal traits, some of which are ridiculous. And I think back about my own being raised as a Catholic and the visions and the personifications that I had of God the Father it was in all the white robes and the big long beard and the judgment book in one hand and the prizes of the thunderbolts in the other hand, depending on which way the scale goes, and some of it is ridiculous. So speaking from y'all's experience, how do we give God ridiculous traits? And when we do, what are those consequences to us when we give God traits that are not God-like?
I'll bite. For me growing up, God was an old white dude that was quite fond of pastels, light blue and white year round. So clearly God is Southern, because we wear white year round. But I imagine God is having a gold G around his neck and some stone tablets, not an iPad, and a stick. I think it's called it a, nowadays we call it a bishop's crook or something like that. But anyway, he had a big stick waiting for me to mess up such that there was the unspoken threat of whatever I did to be written down in the book of forever, and wave the stick in an unloving way in my direction. And so what that did for me, that had an impact on how I saw white men in the world. And because it became that God light in the world. And so what that did is that created this quiet separation from me, because I didn't want that same thing that I thought from capital G God, from the God wannabes that were running around in my world as I named them. So it creates this idea of separation in my mind. It also created this idea of separation in terms of positions of power, because in my mind, God was floating around on a hovercraft wrapped in a cloud. And so there is always this. So it constantly removed God from me. And that it felt like a system that was intentional design to keep me in that less than, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough type of thinking. And so that was the level of ridiculousness that I portrayed on to God. And when I started to understand that very differently, I didn't have all y'all that I could call up and tell about that I think that there is something up, and that there is the power of presence active within me. So I didn't have people I could say that to. I just quietly felt that until I found CCU. And I was like, I knew it. No dude out there bossing me around. So that's when God no longer was the boss of me.
Great, thank you. Yeah, definitely separation, definitely a consequence.
Don, can I go?
Sure.
In ministerial school, when the term was God is unchanging, I struggled with that. And then the comments were, we are changing. We are becoming more in alignment with God. Man always made God in man's image, on the caveman walls and in ancient Egypt and ancient Rome. And this one did this and this one did that. But the God of the universe, if we let go of the personality and go for the principle, like law, an unchanging law, because I have a really hard time with the verse in the Bible that says God reigns on the just and the unjust equally. Well, what happens in prayer? All these ministerial questions start rising up. So for me, when we say something is more than solid in our life, like something you can depend on, that's always there for you, no matter when we're throwing our hissy fits or we're in our human likeness instead of our divine likeness. But I do struggle with some of these things, because at some points we make God human, and the Fillmores did too. And sometimes God is in that divine realm. And one little thing, Kathy, didn't Morgan Freeman eventually play God?
Yes, he did.
Because I thought first of George Burns, the little short dude, you know, and I'm almost 6 feet tall. And then we had Morgan Freeman. Oh God, finally we had Morgan Freeman.
And Jim Carrey. So, yeah. So thank you for that reminder, Tracy.
Talk about ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yahweh.
So I'm just wondering because thank you, Tracy. You got the my imagination going here because yeah, I'm thinking of Odin. So I have Scandinavian roots, and I think of Odin, and you know those stories that they tell about he could be fooled. Even you could it was a different kind of god, right? And you have Zeus, who is throwing thunderbolts and stuff like that. And fast forward to our times, we're talking about a god of principle, which loses the physical form, which loses gender, which loses race, which is all good in my mind, is omnipresent, omniscient. I can't help but wonder what God will become 500 years from now. What will be our new understanding? And I wish I was around to see kind of what humankind would be talking about in terms of a definition of a God a few centuries from now.
Yeah, exactly. Teresa?
Yes, well, of course, to me, the growing up, I thought of my belief system of God because I was raised Catholic also. And I was just thinking as we're having this conversation and Dawn, you said you were raised Catholic too. Remember going through those sacraments? And I think about it now. I think I was in second grade going through the penance, and I'm thinking, goodness gracious, what in heaven's name could a 6 or 7 year old have to say? But there we were, right?
I had to make stuff up. We had to go.
I have sinned. So, I felt judged from the get-go, That'll be 2 Hail Marys, 3 Our Fathers, and no communion for you. But of course, I'm making all that part up now. But, so is it any wonder that I grew up thinking that I just couldn't measure up? You know what I mean? That my best efforts were still falling way below the line. And what a monkey on the back that had been. It led me to several different rooms. But yeah, I think that, only in our humanness, we do give God human traits.
Mm-hmm.
It's not till we go to that aspect of spirit. And I love that. I love the thought of the absolute. I want it, and it makes me feel good to have in my mind some as God is unchanging, absolute good. So that just warmed my heart when I took that in. So, yep, all sorts of trait. Or I think it's or otherwise it's the Santa Claus deal. Oh, if I'm good, then maybe I'll get something good, Or if I'm not, then it's punishing. So.
Yeah, exactly. So I found something kind of paradoxical in that statement that I just read, because he says those who conceive of God as a person will invest him with personal traits, some of which are ridiculous. And he refers to him as a him. So, I mean, even in his statements where he says we shouldn't give him personal traits, he gives them a gender. And that's part of just his terminology and his upbringing too. But how do we not assign God human traits, or other times maybe when we need to and it's okay? But yeah, how do you not give God human traits?
Isn't that kind of, Don, when we say we have a personal relationship and
Mm-hmm.
What's the other side of that? That a non-personal relationship that is both within and without? Because I
Principle.
talk a lot about a God within, and then ministerial teachers would go, now, Tracy, if God is everywhere, also without.
Right. Yeah. Jim?
You used the word earlier, Don. It's that paradox. So we as humans want that warm and fuzzy God. I'm walking with God. God is very personal and right. It knows what I'm thinking and comforts me. But then again, we have this definition of God as principle as well. And it would seem like they're almost mutually exclusive. Now we're taught that we can hold these two things in our mind at the same time, and that they can both be true. Yeah, where are you? And I think of it more of as a continuum. Where are you in your belief in that? Are you with the God is very personal, or is unfeeling and strictly 100% principle? Somewhere along that.
Yeah.
Yeah, each of us is a different point on that spectrum.
Yep.
And I appreciate that, Jim. And I also thought to myself, at different times in my life, me and my humanness, I want to say I needed a personal God to walk me through
Absolutely.
a lot of those, those things that bring you to your knees and, feel like your guts wrenching you. And I thought to myself, when you said that, the good news is that didn't diminish God. It's what I needed in my humanness, that God in my mind is of absolute good is never diminished, because me and my humanness has a need for something more personal. Anyway, that just came to my mind when you were sharing. Thank you.
Well, no, absolutely. And in fact, that's why Jesus talks about Father. That entity takes care of us. I mean, how much warmer, how much better can you feel if your dad's arms are around you? It's going to be okay. So God as Father, yes, absolutely.
And Charles speaks of it in here as comforter.
Yeah.
And
the Holy Spirit is a comforter.
Yeah, if God is in everything, then he would be in the absolute principle. He would also be in the loving entity that is supporting me in my time of need too. He would be in all of it. Yeah.
Teresa, we had a student whose mother passed during our time in class together, and she was really close to her mother, and she was devastated. Also grew up Catholic. Y'all know who I'm talking about. And she needed that personal God. I need you to sit there on the bed with me and hold me and let me cry and love me as a personal God. Mm-hmm. And we all held her in prayer. Of course, we cared about her. But that's when it's kind of like leaving this theoretical God and go ahead. Let it be that personal God. If you have a great relationship and it's Father God, great. If it's Mother God, maybe that's why you think, he says Father, Mother God to encompass the whole thing. And now I work with a lot of science of mind. And so we let go of that completely. I love the prayers that just start the prayer. It doesn't even say our Father or Mother, Father anymore.
Yeah, I thank you, Tracy, for that, because the prayers that just start, I mean, it's not a handwritten letter, for God's sake. So you just pray, you just start talking. But I grew up Baptist Methodist, so all of that, where God was out there doing God's thing. But I had to get to a place where I recognized that God was not a doer of things, but the power itself. And I was sitting and chatting with a friend of mine a few days ago about this. And what he said to me was, what he realized was that at some point he had to remove the reason that he was comfortable with God outside of self and God as Father. He needed somebody to blame when things didn't go like he wanted them to go. And so it's easier to blame something using language that we know, as opposed to trying to blame the power itself, because you got to run around trying to figure out where that is so that you can say, you didn't do what I asked you to do. And he's sat in these conversations with me for years where I talked about God is not a vending machine or Santa Claus, where God does not DoorDash. So, these kinds of things where we start to add our modern perspective to what we think God is. But when we realize that God is not a task rabbit coming to us and saying, okay, Beasley, what do you want today? And I can go, I'm gonna need this. And can you smite these folks over there in Sanford for me? Because getting on my nerves with all that traffic. No, it's not that. God is the absolute power. And I remember years ago, somebody saying that there is a sect of religion, of spirituality that referred to God as an it. And and honestly, if you need something tangible, the power itself, power is an it. And so I think that we take the limits and the box from around the perspectives of God, when we can drop into the fact that God is the power that brings about all of this in me, but not that puts one more box under the Christmas tree or one more Amazon package on my tree.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Did you get that, Tracy? God does not do
I
that.
love that, love that, love that. And I just want to mention Reverend Jill, remember she drove everybody crazy in our Bible, metaphysical Bible studies. She introduced me to an equitable Bible. There's no he's in this Bible. We now have people that are transforming who they're going to be or show up or live, or different body, different type. And this is a total, I'll say gender neutral. They use the word spirit, but there's none of this he stuff. And so just
Can I
another
get that
Bible on my
on
shelf.
Amazon?
Yes, I got it off of Amazon.
Oh, snap.
It's the equitable,
Okay.
it's only a couple of years old. Check it out.
Thank you.
You know, my congregation already knows that I translate the King James into neutral on my own. I just do it and don't even say it anymore. It's just I take out the he's and the hises and replace them with theys and them. So it's just something I do.
Yeah, I try to take out the mother, father, with God when I can, depending on the audience, and put what it represents, which to me is wise and loving. So it's if I need to start a prayer that's with people that are more steeped in unity principles, I'll start a prayer with wise and loving spirit, as opposed to mother, father, God.
Nice.
Because it's
I had an associate minister from Science of Mind, so I am just jumping in and trying to encourage our prayer chaplains, let go of the father mother stuff. Let's just go for prayer.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Great. Okay, so we have time for one, and this is a tough one because I'm not sure I even have an answer for this. Charles states in this chapter that Jesus broke his physical organism into electrons or ions of substance and life, and raised his blood to spiritual potency. And both, he said, then he sowed them as seeds for us for our regeneration. And that man has been picking up and those seeds and bringing them up into a higher level of, what he wants to say, consciousness for our own bodily regeneration. And anybody want to take a stab at describing what he is talking about here?
You know, this reminds me of, Don, when I went to St. Francis of Assisi in Italy, the chapel has a relic of St. Francis in it. And the Catholic people who were devout would go and put their hand on the glass and they would pray with the believing the powers of this relic would be healing. So to me, whether the relic heals or my thought about it heals, to me, that's the, here is my body, here's the bread of my body, the thoughts, and here is the blood of my body. And to transcend like that means I'm just taking that I believe within for me to reach my next level, my next awareness, my next consciousness.
Great. I like that. Jim, you always have a good take on this stuff.
You're absolutely right, Don. This is a tough one. Oh man, this is a tough one. Because he crosses a line for me. Charles talks about where is it? The potency of his blood, spiritual potency of his blood, and sowed them as seeds for our regeneration. And yet, let me just speak for me. I'm not even speak for unity. I don't believe that first of all, I'm not saved by anything that Jesus did except for his example for my life. So it seems to have crossed a line in terms of regeneration for me. Wow, I can't go there. The first time I read this many years ago, my first thought was, is this guy high? I mean, how else do you explain this?
Yeah, and for me, though, the way I can wrap my head around it is to say that he's that there aren't these physical. He writes like there's these physical pieces left that are floating in the ethers, whatever. And for me, it's more like these are the seeds of inspiration. That these are the possibilities. These are what I've come to understand and learn and know, and take this and run with it, kind of thing. That
Do we remember? Yeah, no, I'm right
I
there
have
with
to
you.
take it out of the physical like you do before. I have to put it in the spiritual only because it doesn't make sense for me in the physical.
Right.
But in the spiritual, like, okay, here are these nuggets of, here's a starting point. Here's a piece for you. Take this and understand it the best you can and run with it. And where can you take your consciousness? Because this is where I took mine,
Right.
kind of thing.
Do we know when he wrote this? I forget when he wrote this book. What year was it? Was it in the 40s or was it in the 30s?
I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if this is the time in his education where he was dabbling with atomic theory, atom smashing kind of stuff, and this is just where his mind went. I just don't know.
The end of chapter 6, he does talk about atomic weapons. So it must have been very late in his life, but
So it was in the 40s. Yeah, so it was in the 40s, definitely.
And he talked about Hiroshima, but I wasn't sure if all of these were written as a single work or if they were, if it's a collection of his essays across time. I was going to look into that because I was interested in the same thing.
I think this is one of those collections as well. He rarely wrote a book front to back.
Yeah, I think most of his writings are either his writings or transcribed lessons that people put into a book format and accumulated under a common theme for him. They seem to read that way, at least to me.
If they were verbal initially speeches, then the use of allegory would be more understandable, perhaps in this instance.
Yeah. Kathy, did you want to jump in there? Your mic's on.
Okay, so this is a historical moment. I want you all to remember where you were when I said these words. I'm speechless. I got nothing on that one.
Well, I'll share. I just took it more like, certainly the spiritual aspect of it, but I just really went just it really more talking about our divine potential, and then that we have been given the gift, that our gift was of the great example that Jesus left us, and that Christ consciousness is our way to our own fulfillment, and our destiny of our Christed being. That's all I came up with. Not that that's all. That minimizes it. That's nothing minimal or small about that. Hello, right?
I'll quote Charles and say, that's what I got for now, and I reserve the right to change my mind.
Teresa, I like your take much better. I wish you had edited the book.
Well, it's how I can understand it,
Absolutely.
And I think that's just it too. We're, as you're saying, pointing out when it was written, talking about Charles, knowing that this wasn't a book that was written from cover to cover or anything like that. So to have this time to go through this, to create some understanding around all of these ideas, I think is, it's a gift, and no wonder it's a little perplexing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. All right, well, let's leave that for us to ponder while we sleep. And we'll finish up with this. On page 29, Charles, for me, sounds like he's kind of, once again, in different places, he'll like sum up, make these big grand statements. And on that page, he says, we can attain the same unity with the Father mind that he, Jesus, attained. And he, Jesus again, promised us that he will help us to reach this unity with the Father. That's what this transformation, this Lenten process, to me seems to be, he's talking about, is how can we get more like closer to and higher connection with God mind, the divine. And if Jesus did it, we can do it. And Jesus is our promise to help. So for me, is this Charles telling us, I read it as this, that's the Christ in you. The Christ in you is capable of exactly what Jesus is saying is possible, and he's here to help you do it. And here's my take on life. And all of this kind of just backs all that up. Is that what that statement says to all of you, or something different? We can attain the same unity with the Father mind that he attained, and he promised us that he will help us reach this unity with the Father.
I think that's the whole thing, the whole Bible story. You know, we separated in the garden, and now we're trying to figure out how to get back. And that's the whole story. And actually, for me, because Jesus is so patriarchal to me, that it doesn't have to be. I don't need an intermediary. I don't need the Pope, and I don't need the person. It's all about going into my consciousness, my spirit, and finding my relationship with the Godness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very wordy way of saying tag you're it.
Yeah.
One of the things that that as I started to go back to church as an adult, and understanding the liturgical year and that cycle of seasons, it's one of these things that I think when I picture in my mind the person of Jesus and the activities thereof, is that Jesus was saying, don't pay me any attention. It's kind of like Oz. Pay no attention to the person behind the curtain, but look over there. And over there is really in here. So I think that it is a hat tip, if you will, to saying that, yeah, here's the story, but the story that really matters is the story that you're living. And if you paid as much attention to that as you do to the story that's written, then you change your thoughts, you change your life, and then we have transformation and happy Resurrection Day. Can I please have a chocolate bunny?
Thank you. And malted milk balls.
And ooh, yes.
Don't forget those marshmallow thingies.
Peeps.
Jim, did you want to add anything? No. Teresa?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Tag. We'll leave it with tag you're it.
That's
That works.
And
All right.
Pete.
Well, we're almost out of time. So I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank you, my facilitators, are these wonderful people who were sharing their wisdom and knowledge with us tonight, and for all of you participating and being here. That and remind you, if you want to tithe on this class, to do that to your home church, and that we are so glad to be able to do this for you. And I hope you're having as much fun as we are doing it, or at least I am facilitating. So thank you all for being here. Does anybody want to pray us out?
sure I will.
All right, thanks.
Let's take a breath in and close our eyes and just smile. I say just smile. What a beautiful time to have here together this evening. This journey that we are on as we move through this Lenten process, this time of letting go and releasing and stepping into a greater way, the truth of each and every one of us and each and every one that's on this planet with us at this time. Thank you to our master teacher showing us the way. What a gift, what a gift. And for the authenticity that was shared here this evening, how grateful we are. And so we bless this divine appointment that we've had here together this evening, knowing that Spirit will reveal to us in greater ways everything that is ours to know at the right and perfect moment. And so once again, we are grateful. We say thank you, sweet loving Spirit, for this time together. We claim this to be so, and so it is. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. I hope to see you all next week.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.